Hello everyone, my name is Pedro and I'm here to present my report on assessing the viability of introducing Robusta coffee agriculture to Colombia. First and foremost, some acknowledgements. I want to first thank my advisor, Professor Owusu, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, but he's taught me so much about this topic, and if the most important thing about a Keystone is learning, I've learned so much from him. I want to thank my parents, both for being my parents and for helping me with logistics. I traveled to Colombia twice for this project, and they were essential in making sure everything happened perfectly. And finally, I want to thank my interviewees. I thanked several important stakeholders who were involved in the effort to introduce Robusta coffee agriculture to Colombia, and without them, I really couldn't have done this project, so I wanted to give them a shout out. A brief introduction. Coffee's been very important to Colombia for a very long time. It supports millions of jobs in the countryside, and I've got a personal connection to it myself. My family is Colombian, and Colombia, Robusta agriculture has the potential to really change the Colombian countryside for the better. But there are significant challenges related to its adoption. For one thing, it's unclear quite what form Robusta agriculture would take, and there are pretty widely variable views on what the optimal form of it is. So my project was aimed to synthesize secondary sources and economic data with my interviews to really get at the research question: what are the conditions under which Robusta agriculture may be introduced to Colombia? These are some of the sources I used. For secondary sources, I relied on books, articles, the usual, economic statistics and census data, photographs that I myself took when I was in Colombia, traveling through the coffee region and speaking with coffee farmers, and those interviews that I mentioned, which were really important to giving me a view of what's actually happening on the ground and what people are intending on doing when it comes to Robusta. So I've talked a lot about Robusta, but I wanted to be clear about what exactly that is. So on the left, that's Arabica coffee. That's the traditional variety. It's tastier, but harder to grow. And that's Robusta right there. Not as tasty, but easier to grow, cheaper, yields more. You can grow more of it. And it's what you might see in instant coffee, Maxwell House, that sort of thing, low-quality coffee. Colombia is a major producer of Arabica coffee, currently the second producer worldwide behind Brazil, but it produces no Robusta. Brazil and Vietnam produce about 2/3 of world production, and Brazil is really the benchmark for Latin America when it comes to Robusta production. It's the benchmark that I used, as well as several of the stakeholders that I interviewed. So a brief overview of what agriculture looks like today in Colombia. It supports a lot of employment. You can see it's about 15% of employment in Colombia today, but below 10% of value added, which means that it's less productive than other sectors of the economy. And that's pretty common, but in coffee's case especially, that's because it's very labor intensive. That ensures the quality of the coffee because you have individual coffee pickers picking the beans one by one at the expense of quantity of production. You can also see that Colombian coffee agriculture is very much based on smallholder agriculture. It's a lot of small coffee farmers with an average of 4 acres of land, which means that while it allows for greater social development because these farmers have the ability to grow their own product, it impedes their ability to get the capital required to intensify production, like fertilizer and mechanization. Over the past 30 years, I've found that Robusta has been on a significant upward trajectory, both in absolute terms and relative to Arabica coffee. And the stakeholders I interviewed were very aware of this fact, which is why they were so enthusiastic, in most cases, not all, about introducing Robusta to Colombia. Based on the literature I reviewed, there were 3 sites that seemed to be the most common. First, up here, the northern coast. Second, farther down in the river valleys. And third, the eastern plains, which are known as the Orinoquia. That's the crosshatched region. But the stakeholders I spoke to really focused on the eastern plains as the main region. But there was still some questions about what form that would take. Now, I said that most Arabica cultivation is small scale, But the stakeholders I spoke to, including former President Juan Manuel Santos, whose government helped introduce the current Robusta legislation and projects, said that it was envisioned as being a much larger form of coffee agriculture, similar to Brazil. 50-plus hectares, about 120 acres of coffee production per farm, which would allow for greater mechanization. But there are problems with this. For one thing, you can see that the major ports are marked in green. The eastern plains are quite far away from those, which means it's harder to transport them up there. And they're also far away from most major roads. The roads are this network marked in red. Distance from roads, so places that are farther away, those are marked in purple, blue, green, yellow, etc. So you can see that it would require significant investment in the region to bring them to the ports and to make it competitive. And there's also the question of technology. Most institutions in technology in Colombia have been set up for Arabica cultivation. The scientists I spoke to said it took 20 to 25 years to set up new field varieties, which means that it's going to take a long time before it can really take off. So, based on this, and based on some interviews that I did, I created a model for what forms it might take. So I spoke to Santiago Arango, who is the president, the regional director of sustainability for Nescafé, Nestlé's espresso brand. I spoke to Gustavo Gomez, president of the Colombian Association of Coffee Exporters, who's been very involved in setting up Colombian coffee agriculture, Robusta agriculture, and Luis Guillermo Parra, a former Minister of Agriculture, who's leading a private effort to set up Robusta. And they give me widely varying estimates for how much Robusta cultivation would take place as they saw it. Arango gave me about 30,000 hectares as his figure. For context, current coffee cultivation in Colombia is about 800,000. Gomez said 90,000, and Parra didn't give me a hectareage figure, an area figure. He gave me a production figure. He said he expected to see 25 to 30 million sacks over the next 25 years. So I use these models to create some basic projections for Robusta agriculture. All the stakeholders I spoke to cited Brazil as their benchmark, so I used the Brazilian figure of coffee yield, 44 sacks of coffee, 60 kilogram sacks per hectare. And I went back through the historical record and calculated the rate at which Brazilian Robusta agriculture grew when it was first introduced. I found that that was an average compound rate of 19% per year. So I used that figure to create the projections for 30,000 in the Arango case and 90,000 hectares. So that's the blue and the green line up to a little after 2050. For the Parra prediction, because it was based on production and not yield, or not acreage, I took the 30 million sacks figure after 25 years and mapped it backwards. So I created an exponential function to estimate what it would look like using that 44 sack per hectare figure. And I found that his level of production would require about 700,000 hectares of agriculture in Colombia, which would roughly double the amount of coffee agriculture today. So as you can see, these are widely varying figures requiring widely varying amounts of investment in the region. So, you know, it's going to be something that needs to be resolved before these questions get answered. And so that brings me to my limitations in further research. First and foremost, there's a paper from 2013 that used labor and input costs to estimate how much Colombian Robusta would cost to make relative to other producers. It found that it would be at about Brazil's level, which may be good or may be bad because we don't have the figures for today. So it'd be nice to have the figures updated for 2025 and going forward to see if that cost structure has changed at all and the extent to which it would be competitive. Climate projections, there's some good research being done on the effect of climate on Arabica and Robusta. A 2024 paper did just that. But it would be good to have an economic estimate of that impact. None has been made that I know of, so it'd be good to combine that paper with economic figures. And finally, I said that it required a lot of investment. We need to know how much investment would be good to make it competitive. We don't know that yet, but it'd be good to see if this amount of investment is worth it or if it's better used for other figures, for other projects. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please ask them.
All right, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Any questions? Yeah.
Great presentation. I was curious, does Colombia have microclimates, maybe depending on the elevation, and how does these changes in the regional climates potentially affect Robusta production?
Yes, Colombia has a lot of microclimates that actually allow for Arabica coffee to be very specialized in the upscale specialty coffee market. Robusta agriculture, because it's generally warmer at lower elevations, doesn't have as many because it's based on the flat plains.
Yeah, we have time for 1 more question here.
Thank you. Great work. Oh, that's a bit close. You mentioned how Robusta coffee is often seen as being lower quality, and that potentially suppliers would see that as being lower quality. What would the effect on demand be if sort of trading partners see Robusta as being lesser than Arabica?
This is a concern that several people I spoke to who were more skeptical of Robusta raised, because Colombia has established a brand of being high quality coffee. If you go to a place and it's 100% Colombian coffee, that's a marker of quality. So the concern is that it would tarnish the brand by having Colombian coffee no longer be exclusively a high quality coffee. The response to that is that Robusta coffee occupies a different niche than Arabica coffee does. While there is a movement toward having so-called specialty Robustas, which are more specialized Robusta coffees that try to be more upscale, generally Robusta is not as differentiated as Arabica coffee, and so you would kind of put it in a different stream, so to speak. You'd have the Arabica in one place, and that would maintain the brand, and then the Robusta on the other side would be, kind of filler coffee. That's the hope anyway. It's an open question as to whether or not that would actually take place.
Great, that's all the time we have. And then next up we'll have Henry.